let's see, I don't know quite where to start. My grandmother, Elizabeth, or TB, was her backyard backed up to Margaret Mitchell's backyard. So she said they would go up and go to the attic. This was up on Peachtree Street. They would go to the attic and get either uniforms or costumes. They were uniforms, maybe Civil War, who knows. And then they would do short plays. And I remember my grandmother would always talk about Peggy Mitchell, and she'd clear her throat very dramatically and would say, "So you see, Alexa, I was the first Scarlet." So that was always great. But this is a picture of my grandmother. This is Elizabeth Hitz and my mother, Betty Hitz. She hated that name. Her name was Elizabeth. She was nicknamed Sister and later Betty. She was a child model, as you could see. She's so lovely. And TB is wearing such a great outfit there. And, it's funny, TB, my grandmother, got more and more beautiful as she aged. Here is a picture of Mama later in 1950. This was in April 2nd, 1950 in the Atlanta Journal. Remember, we had 2 papers then. Modeling for J.P. Allen. Mama was quite a girl. I really miss her. Anyway, so there's TB. Margaret Mitchell. This is TB's childhood home. It was on Peachtree Street. It is around where Retail Credit started and later Washington Seminary. It was an enormous house. I couldn't find the postcard, but in those days, people would buy postcards of houses, huge houses in Atlanta. It was something very unusual. And my Uncle Jim, Mama's brother, sent me the postcard. And it says, home of Dr. James Crawford. It was called Montrose. Let's see, there's Peachtree Street. Here is the other side of the family, just for a minute. This is my grandmother. And again, she was Mary Foreman. I'm going to refer to it as Rary. This is painted on ivory. And Lily Adair, Lawrence, says, Mama, V. Adair, it was broken. And my mother, Betty Foreman, took it to V. Adair, Lily's mama, and she glued it back together and painted, repainted you can't even tell. But you can see Rary was a flapper. We called her Rary. This is 1922. She married Robert L. Foreman, who was nicknamed Trot because of David Copperfield. In it, Aunt Betsy Trotwood wanted a girl. And the Foremans had nothing but boys. And then Trot was born. And once again, he was a boy. And so instead of calling him Robert or Bobby, they nicknamed him Trot for Betsy Trotwood, Aunt Betsy Trotwood. Okay, I wanted to talk a little bit about how I got my name. I was supposed to be named Mary Elizabeth after the two. Oh, before that, let's go to, here's TB again with Mama. And I love this because they used the name Buckhead 3 times in it. And TB looks a little bit like Norma Desmond in it. This would have been around 1933, I think, 1932. It's entitled Mrs. Ellick Hitz Enjoys Buying in Buckhead. And of course, this would have been a regular item in the paper, society stuff. So a Brookwood Drive resident, Mrs. Ellick Hitz, we say Ellick because we're Southern, it's Alex, but buys household needs in Buckhead and is a patron of Buckhead business houses for various services in home upkeep. Photo shows Mrs. Hitz with her pretty little daughter, Elizabeth, emerging from a Buckhead store. So there you go. And all you Buckhead people know that Buckhead was actually a shopping district. It was just a small triangle. It's not in Vinings. But anyway, don't get me started on that. Then my father was Robert L. Foreman, Jr. He was an attorney, and he worked one of his first jobs. I think they bought the first house for the second house, Delwood House, for like $12,000, which was enormous, of course. And Daddy had to take a second job at I believe it was the Woodrow Wilson School of Law. And he would do that as a second job. He was a lawyer. He went to Spring Street School. Then he went off to Taft in Watertown, Connecticut. He was a really excellent student. He went to University of UNC in Chapel Hill and Harvard Law School. He became a lawyer at Jones, Byrd, and Howell. And that Jones was Bobby Jones. There it is. It's autographed to me. Mama and Daddy had heard the name Alexa. And since my grandfather was Alex Pitts, all you do is add an A onto it. And she liked that better than Mary Elizabeth. I would have been named, of course, for Mary Foreman and Elizabeth Pitts. So she liked it. I think it's changed my life in a lot of ways. First off, nobody ever got it right. There was another young gal who was born about the same time I was, Alexa Zillison. I always loved that she had the initials AZ. Anyway, I was called Alexis nearly all of my life, or Alexia. And Mama would go home and Mama would go, I don't get it. It's so easy. It's Alexa. Anyway, I would go down to Jonesboro and Howell with Daddy sometimes on Saturday morning. He was not a workaholic, but he would work the first part of each Saturday. Really great as a real estate lawyer, good at his job. And he would take me to Bobby Jones's office, which of course had all the incredible trophies. And so I found out about the name. I can't remember how. I'm sure Mama told me. This is Alexa Sterling, Bobby Jones's best friend. They both grew up around the East Lake golf course and played. She could beat him on the golf course. And she's the one who told him to take care of his temper. As you probably know, he had a horrible, horrible temper. And at one point threw a club. And she's the one who talked to him and calmed him down. I've since met Linton Hopkins, Dr. Hopkins, and who's written a book on where Bobby played about East Lake. And we have been in touch with Alexa's daughter, who is in her 90s. But it's great. It's great. I'm really proud of Alexa. I never met her. She was a violin prodigy. She could build furniture with and groove, no nails. She was a major champion. She was born in Atlanta, played with Bobby, was a great golfer, and then got married and moved to Canada, where she continued to play. And according to her daughter, the father was her husband was he was a doctor, and he was rather controlling. And Alexa put all her ambitions behind her. And her daughter, Sandra, says that on Thursdays, they would clean the silver. And for years and years and years, they would clean these beautiful loving cups and different sized silver things. And she didn't realize until much later, they were all her mother's golfing trophies. It was never mentioned in the house. Anyway, I never got to meet her, but Daddy did take me over in the 60s when Bobby Jones lived over near St. Philip's. I got his autograph. He was, he really was sick from about his 30s on, and had horrible neurological problems. And he was sitting in a wheelchair with like a tray table in front of him, but it was great. I mean, it was really great. And since then, my first cousin, Mary Rawson, has also named her daughter Alexa. So it's fun. We called Alexis all her life, but maybe not now with the new computer thing. That's made it easier. Okay, what do we have left here?
Talk about the fox and the Beatles ticket.
Oh yeah, and also I wanted to point out that both Trot, my father's father, and Trot and TB, my mother's mother, both had polio as children. They both limped. And I remember asking TB about it and asking, do you mind having a limp? And she said, Alexa, I got off so much better than so many of those children. I mean, polio was a horrible, horrible epidemic. And I remember Trot loved to walk. They lived at 216 West Paces Road, and the white fence is still there that I used to paint. It is at the corner of Chatham and West Paces.
So Buckhead Heritage manages the Smith Cemetery next door to that property. So we're very familiar.
Fantastic. And as children, we would wander through there, and there were old German graves that had actually glass on them that people had broken. But the house was where a church had been called Harmony Grove. The church was torn down. The house was built there, 216 West Paces. It still stands. But I would see West Paces at that time was amazing. There was no traffic, of course. And I remember we would go over Christmas mornings to see Rary and Trot. First, we'd see T and grandfather up on Peachtree Street. I'll get back to their apartment. I want to talk to you about the Hershey Point. One day, one Christmas, Mama and I were standing out in the driveway, and of course we could park right in front of the house. There's no problem. And a pony came galloping down the street. It was so lovely. It had on all red harness. It was obviously from maybe Ann Cox Chambers' house, or somebody had gotten a pony for Christmas. And this pony went trotting by or galloping by, and Mama goes, if you can catch it, you can keep it. So I remember, running down. Of course, I didn't get it, but there was no traffic, very quiet. On the other side, and they lived there for years and years and years. Trot died there, and my grandmother Rary had a stroke there and then went into a nursing home. But it had 3 tiers. It had a back patio, followed by a lower grassy area, followed by huge backyard. Trot grew all sorts of flowers, mostly roses. He had his garden back there. And somehow they had gotten the statues from the old Paramount Theater downtown when it closed. They got the statues of the 4 Seasons, which were 3 women and 1 man. And they put them in the backyard. So as kids, we'd look back there and you could see, it's funny, the man stayed in the garage, but the 3 women were out at different parts of the backyard. I don't know if the backyard is still that big. It was lovely. It was just lovely. I mean, it was enormous. And the same thing was for T and grandfather, Mama's parents, when they lived on Peach Street. To my knowledge, they never owned a property. I know they lived on Brookwood Drive for a while with my great grandmother, Hallie, in a duplex. I don't know if they owned it or rented it or what. Otherwise, they always lived in apartments. When I was coming along, they lived at the Pershing Point, which my brother Jim and I thought was heaven. You had the elevator operators, Lulabelle and Sam, the long corridors with the flowered carpeting. You looked right out on Peachtree Street. And best of all, you had the Rose Bowl diner downstairs, and it was like Mary Mac's. You know, as a child, I think I was 5 or 6, but I could write out my order. I thought that was really cool. I always got the same thing each time. I always get chicken pot pie and peppermint ice cream. And so they lived there for several years, as one of my great aunts, Rosalie Howell, had. And I remember I would sleep on the sofa at about 9 o'clock each night. I was there. Traffic stopped. You never heard any passing car, maybe 1 or 2 passing cars. There was also a radio station across the street called WIIN that TB listened to. I don't know why. Maybe it was close, but of course there weren't a lot of radio stations either at that point, WSB and WQXI and all that. But they listened to WIIN because it was sort of, you know, gentle listening. But I mean, it was, again, no traffic. They later moved to Peachtree Road, which is, if you think where Houston's is on Peachtree Road, they were across Colonial Homes Drive. So there were, which I think is a clinic now, they lived in Miss Dorsey's bungalow. The Dorseys had a huge house on Peachtree Street with 1, 2, maybe 6 bungalows around them. And there was a bus stop there. It was a straight shot to E Rivers. I could ride my bicycle if I spent the night all the way down the hill to E Rivers. And I would meet grandfather every afternoon when he got it, when I was there, when he got off the bus. He always rode the bus. He never ate lunch. We think now that was to save money. I don't think he made a lot of money. I think that's why they rented. He was a lawyer. But the backyard of the Dorseys, again, had an incredible tiered garden. So behind, there was a parking lot behind the house. And of course, only houses on Peachtree at that time, only houses. I think there was a bank. I remember there was Fred's Fruit Emporium across from E Rivers, churches, you know, the 3 churches at Dead Man's Curve or Amen Corner, whatever you call it. But you could go down to the first tier. It's where Mrs. Dorsey had beautiful roses. I mean, she had one thing called a peppermint rose that I'd never seen before. Incredible roses. They would also keep their 2 dogs down there during the day. And then there was another tier into the garden, and then another tier, which must have gone straight to Colonial Homes. So, and of course, that's all gone. And then I think that's about it for both sides of the family. My grandfather, Alec M. Hitz, wrote the history of the Cathedral of St. Philip's. And this was, let's see when it was. He was a historian too. I don't know when this was, but I remember he signed it 1947, and it's signed, and I'm donating it to your library, Buckhead people. You're going to love it. Let's see, what else?
Fox Theater.
Fox Theater. Daddy had fallen in love with the Fox. As a young guy, he loved the organ. He would go down there, and he just became obsessed. And then later, he, you know, when he heard it was threatened, then of course we'd lost the Roxy, we'd lost the Paramount, we lost the Rialto for a little while. I managed the Rhodes Theater for a while. We've lost that. So I think Daddy was determined to save the Fox, and he did. He did, along with a lot of help. but he kind of was in there at the right time and saved it. And we would go down there almost every Saturday morning during the 70s and listen to Bob Van Camp play the organ, and Joe Patton, the Phantom of the Fox, was there, and Daddy and he became really, really, really great friends. Oh, and I have my ticket to see the Beatles. This was at the Atlanta Stadium, August 18th, 1965. Daddy took me down there. You can see that it was $4.50. And it was a thrill. I'll never forget. I was 10. I didn't care that we were, it was in an open air stadium, but it was fantastic. I could hear the music because I knew the songs, but otherwise it was just screaming and girls, and flashbulbs and girls trying to jump over the fences. They caught a lot of the girls pulled it back. Okay, let me look one more time. Lenox Square. When grandfather died in the 80s, we were over at TV's at in the bungalow over at the Dorseys, and the phone rang, and of all people, it was Lulabelle, the elevator operator at the Rhodes, and he said, "I've read about your grandfather in the newspaper. Just wanted to see if everybody was all right." Incredible, just incredible. Also, one of Trott's brothers, Clark Howell Foreman, started the Highlands Biological Society in 1927. This is when it took about a day to get up there. When we drove, we had the station wagon with no air conditioning, and it would take several hours. We would stop at Panther Park for lunch and then go on up there. And at that point, it was really just a summer town. But I'm really proud of Uncle Clark. The building at the Botanical Society in Highlands is named the Foreman Building. And for a while, I was on the board of directors up there. I'm really, really proud of him. He was a pretty amazing man. And his son, Hugh, who renamed himself Gino, because we feel like he was called Hugh by a lot of the Puerto Rican residents in the neighborhood where they lived. And he didn't want to be called Hey You, and he changed it to Gino. He became a good friend of Bob Dylan's. And then Maury and Clark, Maury was his wife. They moved to Puerto Rico pretty early on. But I did know him and I knew her. And the main difference between the two families, I mean, I was brought up with the greatest grandparents. I remember being told about Julius and Ethel Rosenberg at Westminster and going home and seeing TV and asking her if she knew about Ethel Rosenberg. And she was fantastic. She said, let's see, was that the Rosenberg that was married to so-and-so, but they got a divorce, and then so-and-so and so, and I said, no, this is somebody different. And then I asked Rary, Daddy's mom, about a week later, and I said, what do you think about Ethel Rosenberg? She goes, honey, she was innocent and, had the whole list of everything. And that was really the difference between the two. It wasn't that T wasn't smart, but she went in a different direction. Rary and Trott were total intellectuals. They had the Shakespeare Club. They had meeting, like a book club. Rary and Trott loved to travel. I remember they loved Japan. I remember when the arch was built in St. Louis, she got on a plane to see it and came back the next day. She just wanted to go see it. So the two families were totally different. Formans were Democrats. Hitzis were Republicans, but Rary and TV had known each other growing up in Atlanta and were good friends. So, I was really brought up with a complete picture. and very distinctive people.
You want to talk about your Turner career a little bit?
Sure. Sure. This is more up to date. I went to E-Rivers. I went to Westminster, which was a shock after being at E-Rivers, which I adored. I really, really loved it. And then during college, my parents divorced, and I just had to get out of there for a little while. So I moved up to Washington, D.C. with my good friend, Luck Gambrell, and lived up there and worked at the American Film Institute. Worked my way up from the box office to the manager of the Film Institute there in DC, which it was the Carter years. It was really exciting to be up there. And the rapid transit system was incredible. You could get anywhere. And then I was homesick. And I came back home and I ran the Rhodes Theater for a while, you know where that is. And we're kin to the Rhodeses through TV's family, the Crawfords. Then I worked at Films Incorporated, which, if you remember being at church and seeing a movie, or at school seeing a movie on a projector, 16 millimeter, we got the movies right out after the theater. So we had 16, we had 35 millimeter, and we rented projectors, which was fantastic for me. We all got projectors. I could take home any movie I wanted at night. And sometimes I remember showing Mama all 6 Thin Mans with Myrna Loy and William Powell all one afternoon into the night. It was heaven. And I wrote a book that was published in 1983 about women directors, screenwriters, editors. They weren't given really any credit. Women started directing in Hollywood in 1895. Directing, producing, acting, of course. Everything was done in the movies by 1915. Everything had been done. Color, widescreen, nudity, drugs, anything we think is cool today. It had all been done by 1915. So anyway, I came home, let's see, Films Incorporated, then video came in and kind of took care of that. You know, we could rent Raiders of the Lost Ark for $1,500 a night at University of Florida. When video came in, they could go and get a tape, and show it. So I got out of there and had a few crazy jobs. And then finally in 1993, TNT, Turner Network Television, started. I got a freelance job there, and then I was hired in 94 as the researcher for Turner Classic Movies. And it's a dream job. It still is. I fact-checked every script that Robert Osborne got up to talk about, every movie, every script. I was on every special shoot. I met incredible people, Sally Field, and, then I was put in charge of the archival interview for Turner Classic Movies. And I've interviewed over 100 movie stars and directors and editors and blacklisted writers. And it's incredible. I was given every 6 months, I could go to Hollywood or New York, and I could pick 15 people. You can see part of my interviews now on YouTube. The one I know is on there now is Claire Trevor. Most of them are gone. 80% are gone now. I think if you go to YouTube TCM and put in Claire Trevor, you'll see the interview, and you'll hear my Southern accent, unfortunately. But that was such a joy. But one thing I learned after all that is that I never sat my mom down, and I never interviewed her. And she knew everything about the Foreman family, the Hitz family, the Crawford family, and now you can do it with an iPhone in an afternoon, and I miss her so much. I kept her, she died back in 98, and I kept her voice, on her answering machine for a while. But anyway, You know, that was the lesson I learned, that I should have been interviewing my my mom. But thank God you guys are doing it. So anyway, at TCM, I met Robert Osborne. Here he is. He was my pal. I worked with him for 23 years. He died in 2017. And to my shock, he left me money in his will. And I was able to make a documentary about Mary Astor, who was in the Maltese Falcon with Bogart, and able to interview Mary Astor's daughter. There's a young picture of Mary. But Robert Osborne left me money in his will, and I was able to afford the clips. It's licensed by TCM now. They have the rights to it, and it's available on DVD. Okay, John, back to you.
All right, I'm not going to get on camera, but this is John Beach again. It's funny how many things we talk about that we cross over. The radio station at the Fox Theater upstairs was in 1975 still there, but had been closed for quite a few years, and it was called WJCL. And the station actually got moved to Oglethorpe University at some point and was out in Oglethorpe. But there was a radio station there. It may have had other numbers, call signs before that. There was also some kind of reporting environment with lots of typewriters and kind of a newsroom upstairs in the Fox Theater. Ken and I have also been to see Joe Patton in his apartments at the Fox, and he was in the Atlanta Rolls Royce Club, and lots of great stuff there.
What a sweet man.
Yeah.
And then remember, WSB was on top of the Biltmore, and the Biltmore had the Wits End players down there. I saw my first movie that I remember at the Rialto Theater, and that was Pollyanna with Haley Mills. I never dreamed I'd meet her. I've met her 3 times now. You know, it's, yeah.
And is that road strip gone now next to Rhodes Hall? Is the strip still there?
I think it's still there. I think the facade of the theater is still there, but now they have the road going, you know, it's a
it's cut off, yeah.
One-way street now.
Right.
But yeah, and we could show 16 millimeter, we could show 30 millimeter, and we could show 70 millimeter. But being a theater manager is a non-stop job. We had the plumbing, we had mice, you know, it was one thing after the next. But
so do you still go to the theaters with these lounge chairs and all of that?
yes, but the problem is now you can get a bucket of beer or something, and the seats heat up, and it's like I wake up and it's what was I didn't know what I saw. Yes, I love the theater. I support the theater. I gotta tell you, it sure is easy to turn on HBO Max and watch Babette's Feast, you know, and not go out to see a movie about the Avengers or Marvel. You know, I guess I'm a snob. I didn't see the remake of West Side Story. You didn't need to remake it. It's a good movie. Remake the bad ones. I did go to see Nightmare Alley. And yes, you got a lot of stars in it, but go back and watch the 1947 version. It is incredible. It's with Tyrone Power, Joan Blundell, Colleen Gray. And it is black and white. It's film noir. It's black and white as it should be. They re-released the new version of Nightmare Alley in black and white. So they've done reverse colorization, I guess, but it doesn't help. It's too much. A film noir should be small and grimy and tough. So yeah, I'm a snob about that. Remake bad movies, not the good ones.
I also know Bobby Jones lived at the Peachtree Andrews condominiums right next to St. Philip.
That's it.
And my construction company remodeled his 2 units when Wiley and Marilyn Obenchain purchased them. And so I've been in that unit quite a few times. A lot of people don't know that that's where he lived. I think he was in a wheelchair or using sticks and needed to be all on one level. So.
And you heard a lot about that from the Linton Hopkins info, and that's just great. Just great. Yeah. I was on the golf team in college. I wasn't very good, but and I cannot make furniture. So, I mean, Alexa has surpassed us all.
Mhm.
Okay, does anybody have any questions?
Yep.
They might. Are they unmuted?
Yes. So if anybody wants to ask a question
There's
or make a
chat.
comment,
There's a chat.
yep, I'll look at that.
Please do. I'll have some apple juice.
Lily said, I had no idea my mother had repaired the fabulous portrait on Ivory.
Yes, yes,
You say Alex Hitt lived on Brookwood Drive?
yes,
Question.
yes.
So repeat these so I don't know what you say.
That was grandparents, TB and grandfather, Elizabeth and Alec, and TB's parents, Dr. Crawford and Hallie, whose nickname was Gaggy, and I don't know why, but I never met her. She died in 55, the year I was born. Apparently she died at the bridge table, which would have been heaven. So yes, they owned a duplex. I believe it's still there, or at least somebody owned it and somebody rented, but yes.
Someone asked, what would you ask your mother now if you had the chance? That's a loaded question.
Well, no, Mama and I were very, very close. We went through my younger brother's death together. Trot's death. Rary was in a nursing home for 11 years, I think. Rary was my, and this is my father's mother, was Mama's great champion. And she got her, after the divorce, Mama had to get credit cards. She didn't have any credit cards. It was the 70s. And Rary got her a used car. She helped her find a place to a condo to live and just really took care of her, which I know must have been hard because they all adored my daddy so much. But, when he left, Mama had to start all over. So she got a job. But we were very, very close. I mean, we went through Jim's death together. And I did ask her once, since her last name was Hitz, if she was ever felt strange during World War II with the name Hitz, even though it was Swiss. And she said, yeah, she thought about that. I think I'd have more questions for my father than my mother. I think my mother, I don't think I have any more questions for her. I mean, yeah, I know what she'd do in different situations. So, yeah. What's next? Rose Bowl. Oh, it was so great. Peppermint ice cream.
Well, that was considered one of the top addresses in Atlanta back then.
And there was the park. And Jim and I would play in the park right next to it. And it was so cool to get in the elevator, and go up to the room. And yeah, but they were very elegant. I never thought of them as not having much because they were both so elegant. And, grandfather was always in a three-piece suit with his wash. And TB was always dressed up, So, and the Foremans were just delightful, but they were both so different. So.
Well, I see the Robert Foreman name. I think I told you this all the time, looking at Buckhead history.
Yes.
So he was very involved in the early days of the homes on Buckhead.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that is the same house at 216 there today. That was.
It is.
Fluffy
It's
McDuffie's.
been, yes, Fluffy McDuffie. Have you interviewed her?
No.
Because Tyrone Power, the actor, was at Fluffy McDuffie's mama's home when he read The Razor's Edge and later made the movie. But he would come to Atlanta during the war because the girls would all go play bridge at which is now called the Swan House. My mother hated that the Inman House, and they'd shoo all the girls away when Tyrone Power came to town. But that's where he read Razor's Edge on the Childs. I believe the mama's maiden name was Nona Childs at her house. Yes,
So that's the same house that's.
they redid it. They redid it and turned it around a little bit. But yeah, it's still there. And that white fence that I painted is still there.
Hmm.
And Kitty Foreman, our wonderful cat, is buried in the cemetery next door, but don't tell. We had a funeral for him and everything. Yeah, that cemetery was in bad shape then, but
We actually, city council gave it to Buckhead Heritage to manage,
great.
and we do that. And
I'd love to go
another
see
one
it.
on Farm
I'd
Road.
love to go see it, yeah.
All right. Any other questions or comments, anyone?
I do. Did you say that Alexa Hitz lived on Brookwood Drive?
No, my grandparents, Alec and TB and TB's parents, Hallie and Dr. Crawford. They were
Okay.
on Brookwood.
Brookwood Drive in Peachtree Heights, where the duck pond is?
No, Brookwood Drive. It's, yeah,
Oh.
near the pond, yeah. Mhm. I think it's still,
Okay.
I believe
Wonder,
that my Uncle Bob was able to walk up to Lindbergh when Lindbergh arrived in town for the christening of his street. And Uncle
okay.
was able to go walk up there and see Lindbergh get out of the limousine.
Wow. So do you know the house on Brookwood? Do you know which one?
Don't know the address, but I think I could find it. It's pretty close. It's right there on Lindbergh almost.
Oh, okay. Okay.
If you take a right onto Brookwood Drive, it's on your left.
Okay. Okay. Great. Thank you.
I have a quick question. It's Lee.
Yes.
Hi. Did any of your grandparents leave any diaries or anything like that? Or troves of letters or wonderful treasures?
No, I had Daddy's love letters to Mama. She was dating Sonny Coolidge at the time. Daddy was in a group called the Paupers. And it was Tom Snyder and Sonny Coolidge and Billy Uge, Jack Cram, Bernard Neal. And they all palled around together and owned, they go up to Lake, not Lake Raven, I can't remember. Anyway, she was involved with Norris Broyles was her first boyfriend, and she gravitated. Hold on, McCary Ballard. In fact, I see Norris when I speak at Peachtree Hills, and he always comes.
Yes.
He could have been my dad. You never know. So Gary Ballard, she was crazy about him. Dating Sonny Coolidge, and then Daddy broke it up. And and it's great because Rary, my grandmother, Rary, and the other grandmother knew each other growing up as kids. So, yeah.
Well, this has been terrific.
Now, Lily, will you call me every day from now on?
We'll be lavaliered.
Back to Atlanta anytime soon?
I'm hoping toward the end of April to come to Atlanta. But we'll be in touch. And
Okay, good. We can go see the ginkgos.
exactly. I think of you every time.
All right. If there are no questions or comments, we'll finish it up.
All right. Thank you, Alexa.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for being interested and for staying.
Oh,
Thank you.
that was fun.
Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
Yes.